Imagine waking up one morning in the year 2025, and suddenly your phone has no signal, your Wi-Fi is down, and the power in your entire neighborhood has vanished. Not just your town or your city. Millions of people are in the same situation all over the world. This isn't the result of a power plant issue or a cyber attack. This is a full-blown solar superstorm erupting with the same strength as the Carrington Event from the year 1859, but happening today. Let's be clear, this is a hypothetical scenario, but it's one based on very real science. The Carrington Event was the most powerful solar storm ever recorded. Back then, it lit up the skies with bright auroras and even set telegraph systems on fire. Now imagine that same level of solar activity slamming into a world that relies on satellites, GPS, internet, and massive interconnected power grids. It's not just a science fiction idea, it's something experts say is possible and maybe even overdue. The sun goes through an 11-year cycle of solar activity. Some years are quiet, while others are loaded with flares and sunspots. During active periods, the sun can launch what's called a coronal mass ejection, or CME. That's when a huge bubble of charged particles and magnetic energy blasts out into space. If the timing and direction are just right, or just wrong, depending how you look at it, it can hit Earth straight on, and that's exactly what happened in 1859. But back then, people didn't have smartphones, air traffic control, or millions of miles of high-voltage power lines. All they had were basic electrical systems, mostly telegraph lines, and even those were fried. Some operators reported electric shocks from their equipment. Now fast forward to today, everything from planes to hospitals to stock markets depends on systems that are much more sensitive. If a Carrington-level solar storm hit today, we wouldn't just see pretty lights in the sky. In the very first hours, the Earth's magnetic field would go into chaos, power grids would be slammed with unexpected electrical currents, transformers could overheat and explode, high-frequency radio used by aircraft and ships might completely drop out. We could lose access to GPS signals, which are used by everything from delivery services to farming equipment. Even oil pipelines could be affected, with pressure and flow data going haywire due to false readings caused by magnetic interference. Satellites would be one of the first to suffer. The intense radiation could fry circuits and knock out communication satellites and weather monitoring systems. The International Space Station might have to power down or shift to a safe mode. All the services that rely on satellites, navigation, television, phone calls, internet, banking could fail within minutes. And this isn't something that would only affect one part of the world. This would be a global problem. That's what makes this scenario so scary. It's not a localized disaster, it's worldwide. And here's where it gets even more serious. The warning time would be very short. Scientists might only have 12 to 18 hours from detecting a major solar flare to the arrival of the charged particles on Earth. That doesn't give much time for governments or energy companies to shut down and protect sensitive systems. There are alert systems in place, like those run by NASA and the NOAA in the United States, but they can only do so much. Once the storm is on its way, there's no stopping it. So what would those first 24 hours look like? Chaos, panic, confusion. People wouldn't be able to contact loved ones, banks could shut down, emergency services might have trouble coordinating, traffic lights would go dark, air traffic control could lose radar, flights might be grounded, and this is just the beginning. The world isn't prepared for a solar event like the one that happened over 160 years ago. Back then, the worst that happened was some sparks and confusion. Today, a storm of that size would hit every part of our lives all at once with very little warning. That's just the beginning of what a Carrington-level event could do in the modern world. The real damage would unfold in the days and weeks that follow, as we'll see next. As the first day of the solar superstorm wraps up, the immediate effects are already devastating. With satellites and communication systems down, the next few hours become a critical time. Power grids, already overloaded with geomagnetically induced currents, begin to fail in large parts of the world. Some areas experience total blackouts, while others deal with rolling outages that could stretch on for weeks, depending on the severity of the damage. And it's not just the power. Transportation systems are in disarray. Without GPS signals, planes are grounded, ships can't navigate, and trains come to a halt. The chaos isn't confined to just the electrical and communications networks. The impact is felt across almost every industry. Hospitals struggle to function as backup power systems are quickly depleted, medical equipment heavily reliant on electricity goes offline, and critical systems for monitoring patient health and administering treatment falter. The consequences for healthcare could be severe, with urgent care centers unable to access patient records, or worse, unable to assist patients in emergency situations. People in need of life-saving procedures would find themselves at the mercy of an overwhelmed system that's barely hanging on. The financial markets are among the hardest hit. Global stock exchanges grind to a halt as trading systems collapse, unable to process transactions. In an era of digital financial systems, this could lead to massive disruptions in buying, selling, and investing. The flow of money would cease, causing panic, particularly in the banking sector. People would rush to ATMs to withdraw cash, but the machines might not work, leaving many with no access to their funds. While the full economic impact of this solar storm would take time to reveal itself, it's likely that the damage would amount to billions, if not trillions, of dollars. At the same time, the agricultural sector would begin to feel the effects of the storm. Modern farming relies heavily on technology, whether it's GPS-guided machinery for planting and harvesting crops or automated systems for managing irrigation. Without those systems functioning, the efficiency of farming operations would drop dramatically. Farmers might find themselves unable to plant or harvest crops on time, leading to food shortages. Supply chains would struggle to keep up with demand, making it difficult to move food from farms to grocery stores, which would increase prices and possibly trigger widespread panic buying. Basic necessities like food, water, and fuel would quickly become scarce in many places. The consequences would be felt around the world. Nations relying on international trade for vital resources would find themselves unable to import or export goods. In the United States alone, the Department of Energy estimates that a major solar storm could knock out a large portion of the country's electrical grid for a period of months, if not longer. And because many of the transformers that power these grids take months or even years to replace, recovery would be slow and painful. The real danger of a Carrington-level solar storm is that it isn't just an event that passes over. The disruptions caused by the initial impact could stretch into weeks, months, and even years. As industries and infrastructure struggle to recover, society would be forced to adapt. People would have to figure out how to function without the conveniences they rely on every day, from smartphones to online banking. Food shortages could become more severe, and access to clean waters might become a challenge in regions where treatment plants are affected by power failures. The environmental impact of the solar storm would also be significant. Satellite-based weather monitoring systems would be down, making it harder to predict and prepare for other natural disasters like hurricanes or wildfires. The inability to monitor the atmosphere could lead to unexpected environmental damage, further compounding the challenges of survival in a post-superstorm world. As we move into the following days, the initial chaos from the solar storm continues to unfold. The world is not prepared for something of this scale, and people start to realize just how fragile our reliance on technology truly is. But this is only the beginning. The ripple effects of a solar storm like this would continue to affect every part of life, and the true extent of the damage wouldn't be clear for weeks, months, or even longer. The recovery process, once it begins, will be far from simple. It will take coordination, innovation, and a major effort to rebuild the systems we've come to rely on so heavily. In the next part, we'll look into what happens when the dust settles and how the world would attempt to recover. As the days pass after the solar superstorm, the damage continues to unfold. The initial panic has begun to settle, but the long-term effects of the event are now becoming painfully apparent. Communities are still grappling with widespread power outages. While some parts of the world may have managed to restore basic electricity, entire regions remain without power. The cost to repair the electrical grids is astronomical, and the lack of trained personnel and equipment to replace destroyed transformers only adds to the delay. In some areas, it's estimated that it could take years to fully restore power, leaving entire populations to live without the conveniences of modern life. With electricity still a scarce commodity, many of the world's technological systems remain compromised. Communication networks reliant on satellite connections remain largely offline. While some ground-based systems may have been partially restored, most of the world's cell towers and internet connections are still out of commission. In the absence of reliable communication, communities turn to more primitive methods, like radio broadcasts, to stay informed. However, even these become increasingly difficult to maintain as resources, including fuel for generators, grow thinner. The loss of global connectivity means that people feel more isolated, with a growing divide between those who still have access to information and those who do not. Transportation continues to struggle. Without GPS, air travel is severely hindered. Commercial flights are grounded, and air traffic control systems remain overwhelmed by the backlog of canceled flights. With no reliable way of navigating, airports become chaotic hubs, as people are stranded and unsure when they can return to their homes or reach other destinations. The already stressed transportation system begins to falter under the weight of the crisis. Ground transportation, like trains and buses, also face interruptions due to electrical failures. Some vehicles that rely on electric systems simply stop working, and the lack of fuel due to distribution issues only exacerbates the problem. The agricultural sector, which initially faced struggles, now begins to show signs of collapse in some regions. Fields lie fallow, crops are lost, and the logistical nightmare of delivering food becomes even more critical. While some food production has been salvaged by local farming operations that are more self-sustaining, the global supply chain continues to suffer. The economy of many nations takes a severe hit as businesses shut down or reduce their operations due to the lack of communication and energy to power their production lines. The loss of critical infrastructure means that industries that rely on just-in-time supply chains, like manufacturing, can't keep up with demand, which affects everything from electronics to clothing to car parts. Even in areas with food, prices soar as supply becomes strained and the demand for basic goods increases. Meanwhile, healthcare systems remain under incredible strain. Hospitals, still reeling from the initial failure of medical devices and power outages, struggle to provide care. Emergency medical equipment like ventilators and dialysis machines, which are dependent on a constant electricity supply, are still inoperable in many places. The ripple effect continues to affect people's health with delayed treatments and surgeries. People with chronic conditions are at risk, and the long-term effects on health will compound the crisis in the months ahead. Medical professionals are overwhelmed, and many struggle with the added pressure of not being able to rely on technology that once helped save lives. The social implications of the solar storm become more pronounced as well. As time goes on, people begin to experience more tension and frustration with each passing day. Basic services are disrupted, leading to growing unrest in some parts of the world. Food riots break out in urban areas where access to necessities is most limited. Communities that are already facing socioeconomic challenges are hit the hardest. The divide between the rich and the poor grows wider, with wealthier areas able to secure limited resources while poorer ones face increasing scarcity. In addition to the human cost, the environment also feels the long-term consequences of the solar superstorm. With satellites still down, scientists are unable to monitor weather systems as effectively as they once could. This lack of data leads to significant challenges in forecasting natural disasters. Floods, hurricanes, and wildfires, which were once more predictable, now pose an even greater threat. Without satellite monitoring, predicting the movement and intensity of storms becomes a game of chance. This leads to a lack of preparation and, in some cases, devastating losses when natural disasters hit unexpectedly. The global economy is also starting to unravel. Trade, which relies heavily on digital communication, remains at a standstill. International businesses struggle to manage logistics without reliable systems in place, and governments scramble to fill the gaps. Banks, which rely on digital records for processing transactions, face crippling delays. As stock markets continue to fluctuate and trade disruptions affect companies worldwide, the full economic impact of this solar storm is becoming clearer. Economists predict that the global economy could shrink by a staggering amount, with losses reaching trillions of dollars. While the initial chaos of the event has calmed somewhat, the lasting effects are only beginning to be felt. Recovery will take years, if not decades, and the world will have to adapt to a new reality, one where the reliance on technology that once seemed invulnerable is now seen as fragile and vulnerable. Societies will have to rethink how they interact with the digital world and rebuild the systems that make life possible in the modern age. But even as recovery efforts begin, the question remains: when will the next Carrington-level solar superstorm strike? And will we be any more prepared the next time it happens? The lessons learned from this event could be our only hope for safeguarding the future. As the world continues to recover from the devastating effects of the solar superstorm, it becomes clear that the long-term repercussions will be felt for generations. The rebuilding process is slow, and many systems that once seemed invincible are now being reevaluated. One of the most immediate challenges in the aftermath of the storm is the worldwide push to adapt and fortify infrastructure against future solar activity. Governments, industries, and scientists have come together in a global effort to ensure that, if a similar event were to happen again, humanity's better prepared. The first steps in this rebuilding effort are focused on strengthening power grids. Engineers work tirelessly to create more resilient electrical systems that can better withstand geomagnetic storms. The process is costly, with some estimates suggesting that billions of dollars will be spent on upgrading grid infrastructure. A focus is placed on replacing outdated transformers with more advanced models capable of handling the surge of energy that a solar storm could cause. Additionally, there is growing investment in the development of backup systems that can keep critical facilities running in the event of power outages, such as hospitals and emergency services. While progress is being made, many experts warn that it will take decades before the global electrical grid can be fully fortified against the threat of a solar superstorm. In the space sector, lessons learned from the disruption to satellite systems are driving innovation. The vulnerability of communication satellites to radiation damage is now a major concern. The industry has already begun to focus on creating more robust and radiation-resistant satellites. These new satellites will feature enhanced shielding and the ability to recover from temporary outages caused by solar storms. However, it's not just about strengthening the satellites themselves. More attention is now being given to creating better early warning systems that can predict solar activity and provide enough time for satellites to be put into protective modes before being hit by solar flares. This could help prevent complete system failures and reduce the amount of time it takes to restore communication networks after a solar storm. On the ground, communities that were hit hardest by the solar storm continue to rebuild, but many face significant challenges. Rural areas that were disconnected from the global network for months or even years have started to focus on more localized energy solutions, like solar panels and wind turbines, to reduce their reliance on the vulnerable power grid. However, implementing these systems on a large scale is expensive and requires the support of governments and businesses to ensure that renewable energy becomes a viable option for communities in need. The reality is that without these alternative power solutions, many areas could remain at the mercy of solar activity for years to come. As time goes on, social and political dynamics also change. Many governments now place more emphasis on disaster preparedness, with the realization that technological infrastructure must be made more resilient to the increasing frequency of space weather events. In some regions, emergency response systems are being overhauled, and plans are put in place to ensure that people can stay informed during future disasters. There is a growing recognition that the fragility of modern systems means that societal structures could break down in the face of widespread disruption, and thus new frameworks must be established to deal with such crises. The economic recovery remains slow. Supply chains that rely on precise timing and digital systems still struggle to return to full functionality. While some industries have managed to adapt to the new reality, others face ongoing difficulties. The global economy, once highly interconnected and reliant on advanced technology, is now operating in a more fragmented way. This shift has led to greater self-sufficiency in some countries, while others face increasing isolation. The lack of global coordination has been one of the most significant setbacks in recovery efforts, as nations work at their own pace to rebuild what was lost. The impact of the solar superstorm also brings about a cultural shift. People, once accustomed to instant communication and constant digital connectivity, now have a deeper understanding of the vulnerabilities of their technology. There's a growing awareness of how dependent society has become on systems that, in many ways, were never designed to withstand the force of a natural event like a solar storm. In many places, communities have started to rethink how they engage with technology, with some even returning to older methods of communication and transportation. People become more focused on local and sustainable living, trying to become less reliant on the global system that, in a single moment, can fail them. Looking forward, researchers continue to study solar activity, hoping to gain a better understanding of the sun's behavior and develop more accurate prediction models. While the next Carrington-level event could be centuries away or right around the corner, the global community has learned valuable lessons from the last disaster. In a world where technology is so deeply integrated into our daily lives, the importance of preparedness cannot be overstated. The recovery from a solar superstorm, like the one we just experienced, may take years, but with each lesson learned, humanity grows stronger and more resilient in the face of natural events that we can only begin to understand. As we move forward, we'll carry the knowledge that the next solar storm is just as unpredictable as the one we've just lived through, and we must be ready for it.